Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positivity here on the show, and with me right now I've got a very special guest. He has wrestled for numerous promotions across the country, also have a couple of books that he wants to promote and plug on the show. Pleased to welcome the one, the only, Beau James. Welcome, Beau, to Wrestling with Heart.
Thanks for having me on here. Looking forward to this. I got to start off. I live half a mile from an airport, private airport. I am just a few minutes from Tri-Cities Regional Airport. So you may hear Blackhawks and you may hear planes coming in and out because I'm only 15 miles from the flood zone.
Okay. Yeah, it's been crazy what's been happening the last couple of weeks as we are recording this podcast. Devastating, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I did the relief efforts in West Virginia. They said that was a 100-year flood 7 years ago. I did the Kentucky flood 2 years ago. They said that was a 1,000-year flood, and this is a 5,000-year flood. They're saying. I don't know how they know that, but we've not seen anything like this since the days of Noah. So it's unbelievable.
It's just horrible, to see people losing their homes and seeing people lose all their personal belongings and stuff. It's just, it's depressing. Really
Yeah.
is. Well, let's talk about you. Are you from Tennessee originally?
Yeah, born in Kingsport, raised just a few miles outside of Kingsport in Fall Branch. Um, but born with a gypsy soul and gypsy blood. My grandmother came to Kingsport when she was 12 years old. She came out of the mountains on the Virginia side. She had never seen indoor plumbing or electricity or anything until she got to Tennessee, and she thought Kingsport was the biggest city in the world. So she pushed us as kids to get out there and see everything. And she moved around the country, and we used to laugh that Granny moved every 2 years because she had got tired of the scenery. So, so that's where the traveling part of my life comes from, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely kind of inspiring. When you live in such a small town, you see the same places every day. It kind of makes you want to go out a little bit, explore the world, explore the rest of the country to see what's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, wrestling has been such a huge part of your life. What can you tell me about your first exposure to the business? Do you recall watching it as a kid? Any fun stories you want to share of some of the wrestlers you remember
Um,
watching?
yeah, I grew up super fan. My grandparents were big fans. I had a cousin and a cousin-in-law that were in the business from the 60s through the 80s. Zach Murray was a referee for Ron Fuller and for Jim Crockett and a few other territories. He also wrestled a little bit. Melvin Johnson wrestled a little bit, ref for the Crockett's and Nick Goulas and Fuller and Kazanas and all those guys. So I used to see them on TV as a kid, and they would tell me, hey, that's your cousins right there. So I always wanted to be a wrestler. I knew that's where I was going to end up. I knew there was no other focus in life. There was no other goal in life. There was nothing. I knew at 6 years old. Actually, before that, I knew it before that. But in kindergarten, I stood up and told everybody I will be a pro wrestler, and everybody laughed. And years later, my nephew brought me to kindergarten for show and tell because I was the local wrestling star here on TV, and none of the other kids had a uncle that was wrestling on TV. So, and he had the same teacher. That one of the first years she taught, she had me. Her last year was teaching Zach, and she told me out of ever how many years it was, and ever how many hundreds or thousands of kids, I was the only kid that ever stood up in class and said, "I will be this," and became that.
That's
So
pretty awesome.
I've known all along. I've known since probably infancy that I was going to be a pro wrestler. Where we lived, we got the Knoxville wrestling, we got Mid Atlantic. One was on the local NBC, one was on the local JHL. I didn't see cable TV until I was probably 7, 8 years old. Um, I didn't see any other wrestling other than NWA Southeastern or NWA Mid Atlantic until the PAFOs opened up and started ICW and Outlaw Territory. The first time that I saw the WWF, I was at my grandparents in Virginia. They lived up in Northern Virginia, and we went up there one summer, and I saw it. And I told my grandpa, I don't know who these people are, but they're liars. He's not the world champion. It was Bob Backlund. I said, he's not the world champion. Harley Race is the world champion. I don't even know who these guys are. So, no, I was an NWA guy through and through. The first time that I saw Georgia TV because my granny lived in town and she had cable, and I saw that and became a fan of that. When we first started getting the WWF product here on TV, I was 11 years old, and I absolutely hated it with a passion.
Mm.
Now there was wrestlers on there that I liked that had came from Mid Atlantic and I'd seen in Knoxville or wherever else. Um, but no, my love of pro wrestling is Southern pro wrestling, Memphis, Georgia, Mid Atlantic, Knoxville, of course, and there was territories here that most people don't even know about. Kingsport was its own territory until 1975. It was separate from everything else. I just did a big podcast with Briscoe and Bradshaw explaining that whole history of East Tennessee. I happen to have a book about that, so
Mm-hmm.
we'll
I
talk
actually
about
have that one as well. Yes.
So I didn't know. I was a teenager or preteen before we started seeing world class AWA and blah blah blah.
But there was a
I
lot of
come
variety back in those days, though, because you had so many uh, wrestling organizations within that territory system that you were able to watch.
well, you couldn't see them until about 1985.
Really?
Be- yeah, because you got no other wrestling in your territory. The local promoters kept everybody else. The only time you would see something from somewhere else is when someone was coming in and they would show a video from another territory and you would sit there trying to figure out where is that from? Ooh, I like the way that TV setup looks. I would like to see that. No, that's why wrestling magazines were so big and so important. That's how you kept up with all the other stuff.
When do you recall buying your first wrestling magazine and checking out the other territories and going, "Ooh,
October
wow."
1982,
Mm.
went to my first live wrestling card in October of 1982, and a kid had one getting people to sign it. And I'm looking at it, and I said, "Can I see that?" And he shows it to me. I said, "Where do you get these?" Where'd you get this? He said, "Wallace Newsstand downtown. They have 7, 8, 10 different kinds." I ran back to where my dad was sitting. I said, "You know where Wallace Newsstand is?" He's like, "Yeah, it's downtown." I said, "We got to go. They got wrestling books." And I started buying them right there that week and dreamed of being in those. And before I was 20 years old or 21 years old, I was in PWI, I was in The Wrestler, I was in Inside Wrestling, I was in all these magazines.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a dream of yours is to be in those magazines, being featured.
Yeah,
And yeah, you started in the business at 14 years old.
yeah.
14 years old. Okay. That's so young being able to do that. And were you a wrestler? Did you work as a referee? What?
I started at 14, I started working, putting the ring up, selling merchandise for the Continental Territory, thanks to Bob Polk and Ron West, and I was getting paid for that. At 15, I started refereeing. I started managing when I was like 16 or 17. I was wrestling before I was out of high school. People ask me all the time, first match, first this, first, and I say, I don't. It's all ran together. This month
Hmm.
right here, October of 2024, marks 36 years in the business.
Hmm.
And there's
Congratulations.
people, thank you.
You're welcome.
Young guys ask me, or I ask young guys now, how many matches you think you've had? Well, 5 years. I said, no, 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 no. I'm not asking you years. I'm asking you actual days on the road wrestling somewhere. Because you can wrestle in your hometown once a month for 20 years and you still have not got but a few hundred matches. When I started, you wrestled almost every day. A lot of times you wrestled every day. When I went to Memphis, you wrestled every day and twice on Saturday and sometimes twice on Sunday. And when I say twice, that means different towns, not the same event, because they was the same events on the same day. You may have 4 matches in a day.
It's very
So
intense.
I was still wrestling 3 to 5 days a week up until the pandemic. And so I've been blessed to stay booked from 14 years old all the way on and make money at it.
Yeah, I think that it really takes a lot of dedication have the drive to really be a professional wrestler and
There, there was
knowing at 6 years old I want to do this and actually getting into the business. I mean, it really says a lot.
nothing else that I ever wanted to do. There's nothing else at 50 years old that I want to do. I'm just coming off a 3 day loop where first time since the pandemic, I've wrestled 3 days in a row. And my goal as a kid, when I was talking about my granny and the gypsy blood and all that stuff, my goal was to be a wrestler and to be in a different town every single day of my life. I never wanted a home. I never cared about having a family. I, I'm going to be a wrestler. This is it. This is the goal. What's going to happen?
Now, when you start training and putting in those reps, I mean, I'd imagine those bumps you feel them. It is hard, falling on that mat. It's
No,
not unlike anything else.
no training. There was no training schools back then. Training schools are a this century deal. They, the first wrestling schools came along when the um, territory started dying and the boys needed a way to make money. There's no greater, faster money grab than a wrestling school. That's why most of them around the country, other than probably 3 or 4, are complete and total garbage. Because here's the deal: you have these guys that wrestle in one town once or twice a week with their buddies. They're not wrestling experienced wrestlers. They're not in the car with experienced wrestlers. They're not wrestling in front of audiences. They're not getting any better, but they're training people when they have no experience. If you want to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school. You had to go to broadcast school to have a career in radio and television. Anybody can open a wrestling school and there's nothing to govern it. You can open a wrestling school tomorrow and there's nobody to stop you. That is a huge problem in our business. My training in the ring as a referee as a kid with people like Ivan Koloff, Jimmy Valiant, Jimmy Golden, Mongolian Stomper, Robert Fuller, Tommy Rich, Wahoo McDaniels, Ronnie Garvin, Greg Valentine, the Barbarian, any night of the week. My education came from riding in the car with those men. My education came from riding with people that helped me when I started, like Glenn Day, who was the equalizer, who was a journeyman independent guy, but had worked all around. Wrestling schools, you can learn how to take a bump. You can learn how to grab certain holds in a school. You cannot learn how to work. You cannot learn how to be a wrestler until you are in front of an audience in the ring with an experienced veteran that can teach you.
So back in the day, as you had mentioned there weren't any wrestling schools when you first started. Just
No,
learning the basics. You're there. You're learning how to ref. You're learning how to do all these things. Tell me about the first day when you had to ref a match, because that is just I mean, with no experience beforehand, that's got to be stressful.
no, wasn't stressful at all. I'd been around the business. Some guys had spoke openly about stuff in front of me because I had been around so long. They assumed that I was smart, but I wasn't smart, and I really didn't understand what they were talking about. So I'm selling tickets in a spot show one night. Al Bass, the manager, and he's promoting, sticks his head out the curtain and looks, and I'm sitting there selling tickets, and he goes, and I walk over there, and he says, "Can you referee?" I said, "Maybe when I grow up." He goes, "I mean, in 10 minutes." I said, He goes, "We'll pay you." I said, "I can do it." I've been driven at this as being a job, not just a passion, but a way to make it through life. So I'm not smartened up. I'm not giving a finish. I'm not giving anything. Two young green baby faces, a heel that's a complete outlaw that has no idea, and the other heel was a veteran that had worked the territories who led all three of us through it. Somehow I made it through it. Somehow I did all right, I guess, because from that day forward until now, I was booked and have been booked. And the one, I was in the business for probably 6 months before anyone ever told me it was a work. And the reason being, I blew a finish in Lenoir City, North Carolina, or Lenoir City, Tennessee, with Jeff Sword, Doug Vines, managed by Izzy Slapowicz. They had seen on TV as a kid. And I blew because I didn't know the finish and I didn't know what was going on. And we came back and they looked at me and they said, "Come here." And I was scared. And they said, "Sit down." So I sit down and they smartened me up. Then I thought, okay. Then I learned. I nobody the business was so protected when I started. There was no schools. There was tryouts where you could come and pay money and they'd break your ankle or your wrist or bust your head or stretch you and run you off. So, hey, I tried. That stuff's for real. You had to be born recruited for the business, or you had to be like me, be around so much that you gained the trust of the people to be put in the business. That's how I was in. Because, like I said, guys would speak openly about stuff, and I would have no what they were talking about. Till a year or two later, I'd be going to a town, and I go, "Hey, wait a minute! I heard him, and I know now I know what he said." No one ever taught me how to speak Carney. Nobody ever taught me how to speak wrestler. I learned it from listening. Young wrestlers out there, here's advice: sit down, shut up, listen, and you will learn. I as a young man, I surrounded myself with territorial people to learn. As an older guy now, a middle-aged man, I surround myself with young guys and girls because they're still teaching me, but I'm teaching them, but I'm learning their ways. Same passion, different thought process, and they don't speak the language of a wrestler. And they also don't have the dressing room etiquette of a wrestler, and they also don't have the common sense of most people in the wrestling business from generations before. The way these kids in the dressing room would have got you beat up and thrown out years, but it's a different day and it's a different time.
How do you feel that the locker room etiquette has changed now compared to when you started in the business?
It was a prison when I started. The prisoner with the most time sat in the furthest corner to the left from the door. That way he could see the entire dressing room and he could see the door and he could hear everything possible. Now, the guys with the next most time sat in that corner. Next most time sat in that corner. And all throughout the night, they looked at each other. They're policing the dressing room. Young kids are in the middle, so everybody's eyes are on them. You didn't speak. You didn't run around. You sure as heck didn't bring your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, kids, anything else in that dressing room. And it was a place of business. And you held that. You didn't sit in anyone's chair. You didn't dare touch anyone's stuff. You didn't move anything. I see that all happen now in dressing rooms everywhere.
Well, when you finally broke out as a wrestler, becoming a professional wrestler, what were those first few matches like?
Learning, but I had a heads up because I had already refed thousands of matches with some of the biggest territorial stars in the world. So I already had that education. I was already above. Um, I had already been beat up and stretched by people like Wahoo and Garvin and Valentine and those guys doing the carnival tours every summer. Um, but I wrestled a lot of old time guys early on. I also wrestled a lot of young guys. So it's just education, and it's learning and taking your bumps and in time. Rome's not built in a day. It takes years to learn this business. Now it takes a lifetime to learn this business because it's all different and it's all changing and it's forever changing.
Yeah, and it's going to keep continuing to evolve. To you, what makes a good professional wrestler?
I come from a different time and place. To me, a good pro wrestler wrestles every day. He and here, wife's birthday, you're booked, you wrestle. Kid's birthday, you wrestle. Sick, you wrestle. Hurt, you wrestle. Someone dies in your family, I'm sorry, you're on the road. There's nothing you can do about it. Make the town. Always make the town. That's what was taught to me from day one. And I was told by many old time guys, if there's ever a day you want to do anything other than this, get out, never come back. You don't love it enough. That was the mindset. That's what we were taught. Now guys want to take off to go to concerts or to go to this, or it's their kid's birthday. And I see that. I didn't see it for many years. I see it now. I wrestled. I've only missed in 36 years. I think there's 5 Thanksgiving nights I've not been at wrestling, and 3 of them have been the last 3 years.
Mm.
Uh, I used to wrestle 2 towns on Christmas, one in the afternoon, one at night. I wrestle 4th of July. All holidays are big days for wrestling. Young guys don't want to do that now. And they don't understand those are the biggest nights of the year. Thanksgiving and Christmas night, traditionally through the territories, were the 2 biggest nights of the year. But it's all different. And it's me having to learn their thought process and them having to deal with my thought process because it was preached to me and beat into me. When you become a wrestler, all normalcy of life is gone. You have none. It's this business above everything else, above everybody else, above your own well being, above your own health, physically or mentally. You're booked, you're there because somebody may come to see you and they spend their money to see you and you're not there, they may not come back.
It's a
That was
commitment.
the thought. That was the thought process. So I'm proud to say, in 36 years, I have missed 3 towns, and all 3 of them have been from blizzards. Just physically could not get there, and was so mad at myself and embarrassed that I could not get there. I've wrestled with a broken shin bone. I've wrestled with concussions. I've wrestled with broken fingers, bones in my hand, broken foot. You know, it's a different day and time. Now young wrestlers have it easier. They can heal up, they can get time off, they can do what they need to do. But us guys that paved that road for them are like, huh, and I hate to be that guy back in my day, but it's a hard adjustment in life in between. And I am a bridge in between generations of I believe I am the only person in the history of wrestling in the ring has punched Jackie Fargo and AJ Styles. I don't think there's anyone else. If there is, it would be Lawler, and I don't believe Lawler's ever worked with AJ. I may be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think I think they may have had a segment on television together, but I don't think they ever wrestled each other.
Yeah. So I am definitely a bridge between generations.
What Since we're a podcast about positivity, what positive things have you seen in the business over the last few years?
The last few years, uh, let's talk pandemic. We lost our minds in the pandemic
Yeah.
because we're always on the go. We're always going. People don't realize how many miles a week wrestlers do. And there's still this misconception out there of independent wrestlers wrestle on the weekend, nothing else, and they wrestle close to home. No, those are 40-miler play wrestlers. The ones of us that was out there making money and traveling and going and staying booked, we were gone 3 to 5 days a week. I was riding with the Heat Seekers the last event before the shutdown. I got out of the car and it was like 3 in the morning, Sunday morning, Saturday night. And I said, "Hey boys, I'll see y'all Tuesday." I didn't see them for over a year because everything shut down that week. So it's hurry up and sit still. I can't tell you how many wrestlers fell apart, needed surgery, needed this, needed that. But here's what happened. Phone calls were made of guys talking to each other to check on each other. There's a group of wrestlers that I have a video call with every Saturday night now that started during the pandemic. Late at night. I'm talking 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Usually when we're on the road, we started calling each other. Are you awake? Yeah, I'm wide awake. Because we're wide awake. And we kept each other sane through all that. Now, during the pandemic, I lost two very close friends and I lost my mother.
So
I
sorry.
almost I almost died during the pandemic myself, not COVID, but another medical emergency. And I was told I would never wrestle again. I would never do anything again. I was out of the business for almost 2 years, counting the pandemic and that. And I've made a full recovery and full comeback. But if it wasn't for the boys, I would have laid down and died. If it wasn't for the people, and here's another thing. People think all these wrestlers are buddies and they're friends and they're this and they're that. No. We have to work with people that we despise. We have to work with people that we don't want to be around. We have to work with people we don't know. But we have to have a mutual respect for each other because we're doing the same job and going out there and trusting each other with our bodies and our livelihood. And sometimes you have to get away from people to understand how much you miss them and you respect them and you actually do like them. And that happened a lot with that. Also, during the pandemic, you saw a lot of the boys helping take care of each other because we got nobody else. We alienate ourselves from our families being in this business. Some young wrestlers now, they have good relationships with their family. I didn't have any sorts of a relationship really with some of my family until the pandemic came along because I was gone every day. I was moving every day. I can't stand to sit and listen to someone talk about their daily life at their job that they go to every single day at the same place doing the same thing. It's mind numbing to me.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
gets tiring.
I don't understand it. They don't understand how did you go to Virginia, Kentucky and wrestle at 12 o'clock in the afternoon at a festival and make a town 5 hours away in West Virginia and wrestle there that night, then drive back to Tennessee all in the same day. And what did you see? And how do you do it? They can't comprehend with that. Um, I can't. It's like trying to have a conversation with somebody they've never traveled, they've never left. That's my parents took us on vacations every year, so we traveled. My granny was a gypsy. So I had it. I've been before I ever started wrestling. I'd been all over the East Coast, from Florida all the way up to Pennsylvania, out to Indiana, and I'd been all over the place. So traveling
Midwest
was
too.
not hard for me. A lot of people, young kids that get into business, it's very hard for them. The positive thing now is people like me trying to teach the young kids to make sure this business continues. Now, some of them don't want to hear it, some of them don't want to listen, and some of them are not going to. But some of them are. And when you tell them stories of wrestling past, it's so foreign to them, they don't know what to believe and not what not to believe. Downside of that is guys that have wrestled in their hometown and nowhere else telling these stories of how they beat the assassin or the spoiler or this famous person when they've never even been in the same building with them, much less the same ring with them. So the young kids have to figure out what's for real, what's not for real. And I pride myself on this. All my social media, you can look at people I have wrestled over the years and see it. There's videos of me out there wrestling all these people. I tell young guys, just look me up. It ain't hard. Y'all got the Google. Go do it. But I spend part of my day every day helping young guys try to understand this business because it's hard.
Yeah, it's very tough, and the cream always rises to the top. You have to be at such an elite level to really understand the fundamentals of what makes a really good wrestler and the cardio, got to get that pressure up, that intensity level. It all starts kicking in, and then you start putting your work in, your reps in, and you start, making a name for yourself, on the independent scene, and hopefully get signed to a major company, a big company like a WWE or an AEW or a
Right.
TNA, and go from there.
I'll let you in on a little secret. All of that stuff is minute of how you make it. This is a mental business. I don't care how great of a physical athlete you are. If you don't have a mental understanding of this profession, you'll never make a dime or ever get an opportunity or anything. You have to have some understanding of how it works. You have to learn how to play the game because there's only so many spots out there. Really, truly, how many top spots are there? How many contracted spots are they? A couple hundred with all the promotions?
Yeah.
1,000 wrestlers, supposed wrestlers. What separate? And that's what I teach. What Tom Pritchard teaches people. What separates you from everybody else? And I tell all these young guys and girls, learn to speak wrestler. Learn because here's the deal. Everybody working in that office, Bruce Pritchard, Michael Hayes, even to the Performance Center with Steve Carino and those guys, they all come from the same world I come from. They come from the territorial guys. You think they don't speak wrestler? Corporate people may not like it, but if you was able to open up with a wrestling phrase, you think you ain't going to get over with them? Right, you are. And it's just, I don't, I've had kids in the last year and a couple of months. I've had several get NWA matches. I've had two get invited to a WWE tryout thing. I've had one on AEW. So connections. I know people that wrestle everywhere. I wrestled with a lot of people that are now office people for big promotions. And my promotion, Southern States Wrestling, it's been running for 33 years. Now it's how I give back to the business. It's a training tool. We do weekly episodes. We shoot with multiple cameras so they know to work this camera and that camera. We have agents, that guys like me that wrestled for years and years and years in the dressing room. Tom Pritchard is in the dressing room sometimes. We just had an AEW producer at our event a few weeks ago. So we have people there to talk to them and to teach them and help them lay matches out and do all the stuff. And do we have the budget of Billy Corgan? No. Do we have the budget of a lot of these other big top independent promotions? No. We have a great sponsor, Dalton Direct Carpets and Flooring of Kingsport. Big shout out. But it's a place to learn to get you ready for the next level. It's a place to learn to get you ready if an opportunity ever comes. And we're going to test you and we're going to push you and we're going to see if you have it or not. And we're going to try to mentally break you at times to see how you react because you have to have all those tools to make money in this business. You have to have it all. And a lot of young people don't understand that. They think, oh, I'll get hired and I'll just wrestle on Raw on Monday night and that's it. They don't understand you get sent to the Performance Center for months, maybe years to learn the WWE style. They don't understand the hours you have to put in. They don't understand that they will be away from their family. So you have to try this generation and teach them some of the old ways, learning the new ways ourselves, but it's still the wrestling business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's at 5 years old in kindergarten when I said I am going to be a wrestler. I meant it. I became it. But the goal was a different town every day, and this never ends.
What made you decide to start up the wrestling promotion, Southern States Wrestling?
I started it when I was 16 years old because the territory that was here had shut down. There's some outlaw wrestling with guys that wrestled here, nowhere else, never traveled, never learned, never did anything, poorly trained. There was some young talent here that nobody would give an opportunity. So from day one, even when I was a teenager starting till now as a middle-aged man, it's been about young talent. There was a few years in there to where I got to where I hated the wrestling business. And I didn't want young guys and girls around me. I couldn't stand them. I couldn't because they didn't speak my language. They refused to learn our language. They refused to learn our ways. What made me fall in love with wrestling again is my little grandnephew, who's 7 years old now, my little grandniece that's 6 years old. They love the modern product because that is the wrestling of their childhood. And the greatest wrestling of all time is the wrestling of your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I watch through their eyes. I watch them get excited. Do I understand everything? No. Do I like everything? No. But there's a lot of great stuff out there that I see that I do like. Um, I don't run to social media and bury it. I don't run to social media and go, why do they do this? Or I would do this. And here's why, Stanley. I don't work there. I don't know what's coming next. I don't know the guide of where they're going. I don't know what they're doing. So how does these idiots at home know to where they got to run and go, well, they did it wrong, or they did this wrong, or they did that wrong? No, you don't have a clue what they're doing. Sit back, enjoy it, be a fan. You know, your armchair quarterbacking. You play with a Nerf ball out in the yard with your buddies on Saturday. Now you think you're an NFL quarterback or coach. Same thing with these guys that think that they have a clue of what AEW, WWE, or anybody else is doing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just like the one cool thing about wrestling, especially back then, was that you were left with a cliffhanger after the end of the show. Like, what's going to happen next week? You know, if you see a surprise angle that happens, you want to tune in next week to watch what happens.
Yeah, my fandom in youth was you had to go to the arenas to see what happened. You watched the TV, that was a commercial to get you to the arenas, you know, which is a foreign aspect now because everything streamed around the world and in a matter of seconds, you don't have to go anywhere to see it.
It's very
Uh,
accessible.
yeah, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different processing.
Hmm.
People like to say wrestling is evolving, but is it? It's changing. It's forever changing, but is it evolving? You know, Nick Goulas had 100 full-time hired pro wrestlers in Nashville, 52 weeks a year for 40 years. Now that's one territory. Crockett had about the same in Charlotte. Atlanta had a crew. Louisiana had a crew. Kingsport had a crew. Now there's three places to go. I don't find that involving where there's less jobs than ever, but I find it fascinating that there's more money than ever. You know, it's just it's a different world, and a
It
lot of people cannot handle the changes, and they walk away and they stay away. Me, I'm a lifer. I am a lifer. I will be in wrestling until they put me in the ground. And the Lord has blessed me with it. To go back to something else you asked about, to where today I was able to hand over a good sized donation from 3 days on the road from my uh, merchandise sale to help flood victims. I can do podcasts like this and people will listen because they know who I am from other podcasts.
mhm.
And I can say, hey, East Tennessee's in trouble. Western North Carolina's in trouble. There's hundreds of people dead. There's still dozens of people missing. We need help. And people listen. Many people, because of my social media, have donated to the right place, not the Red Cross, not to FEMA, but to the right people to get the job done. Every year, we do a fundraiser for Hunger First, and it's in my mother's name because my mother was very involved with Hunger First in Kingsport. It's a group to feed and clothe the homeless and needy of our community, our home community. And there is a major homeless problem in this market because it is boomed, just like Nashville, where you're at. People
Mhm.
can't afford to live.
No.
And, last year we had the most donated for the children in need than we'd had in 20 years. We had a
Mm.
room, and when we took them and dropped them off, they were blown away. But that was all from wrestling fans. We took box after box after box of food. We took, I don't know how many new jackets and gloves and hats and underwear for people that need it. You can't always take from the wrestling business, and that's something that's missing nowadays from this young generation. And I'm not trying to make this generation against generation. It's something that was lost along the way. It's not their fault. That's why I always pitch to them, you've got to be involved in the community, because you can't just take money from people. You can't just take everything. You have to give back. That's why we do all through the years through my promotions. We've did fundraisers for fire departments, children's hospital, uh, Northeast Tennessee food banks, drives, toy drives, school teams, Cub Scouts. We any nonprofit. If you're an East Tennessee nonprofit listening and you need a fundraiser, I'm the person to talk to because I will help you make money for your civic organization. And I love doing it. And I love doing the fairs and the festivals all over Tennessee that we do in Virginia and Kentucky. And you know, I love these mountains. A few years ago, myself and Daniel Richards went viral, and we ended up on CNN and Fox News and BBC and CBS Evening News. We ended up on all this major international coverage. And Jim Axelrod came and spent a couple of, and he said, "Hey, you're a part of these mountains. The mountains are a part of you." And I had never really thought about it, but I do, and I am, and I love it, and it's why I'm hurting knowing right now, buddy, 15 miles from here, they're digging bottom of the ground that were covered in mud. The people that just went to work that day and got washed away.
Yeah, I mean, seeing the stuff that's going on with the hurricanes and floods, especially every year when you hear about that stuff, hearing that people are losing their houses and homes and food, and it makes you go, man, I feel for these people. They're going
Yeah.
through a rough time in their life. What can I do to help them when they're going through so much pain in their life?
Until you stand there and see it with your own eyes, you can see it on TV, you can see pictures of it, you can see it on social media. But until you stand there and see the devastation and where it really hits home to me, this one is home. The other two were towns that I have wrestled in for 35 years, and I knew the mayors and the sheriffs and the school teachers because we've been over there raising money for these groups all these years. And it's awful. On my social media, I've got a couple of links and I'll tell everybody how to get to that. If you want to help, and it will stay right here in the mountains, I know the two people that you need to send the donations to, and we gladly appreciate every bit of it. And I started this week because this is the first week of recovery. Um, you know, I take out what it costs me to get the pictures printed and the books printed, or whatever I'm selling. Everything else is going to flood relief because these people need it, and they're going to need it for years to come, because we've never and ever seen anything like this here in these mountains. And it's a 200 square mile of devastation. Business is gone, churches are gone. We don't know when the kids can go back to school. My niece and nephew are out of school because there's families living in their schools right now, and we don't have anywhere to put them. We don't have anywhere to relocate them. So it's going to be a long process.
Yeah, it's hard when you have stuff like this go on, especially for young kids. What is it about giving back to the community, Beau, that gives you the most joy?
Um, that's a loaded question. Uh, my dad is an 8-time combat wounded Marine. He's the last surviving member of the Walking Dead, the first group of Walking Dead that hit the ground in Vietnam. He's the last one
Hmm.
alive, survivor. His father died when he was a child, and he was abandoned by his mother, and he's been on his own since he's 12 years old. And my dad's a rough guy, and he's a tough guy, and if you just know him now, he's a little old man, but if you knew what he was. And I remember being like kindergarten, first grade, somewhere in there, and my dad had started helping the Marine Corps with the Toys for Tots. And I went with him a couple of times when they took the kids their toys. And I didn't fully understand it at that age, but I knew it was something. And I knew it was something of great importance. My granny that I talked about grew up in a sharecropper shack until she moved to Tennessee when she was 12 years old. She grew up with nothing. She didn't know of anything until she made it on her own. Um, so she pushed my mom's side, and to become more, to do more, and to always help people. Because my granny came up during the Depression, and she
Yeah,
came up during the hard times
yeah.
in this country. My dad came up with nothing, and so it's always been instilled to give back. But I have been there many times through my life when Santa Claus gives those toys that we collect, and I've seen it, and it's such a happy, joyous moment, but it's a heartbreaking moment too, because you realize if it wasn't for some wrestling fan handing that to me, or maybe I bought that one, I don't, because I buy a bunch of them every year myself. But if it wasn't for what we did, and I'm not saying this to get any kind of credit, because it goes to the people that help us do these events every year, but you realize no one else stood up, no one else stepped in, no one else gave, no one else is standing here now. If not me, then who? If not us, then who? And I sit here last Sunday. The floods came Friday. I had to go wrestle Saturday. We knew the floods. We knew about them. We didn't know how bad they were till last Sunday when we started getting the videos and getting the stuff. And I sat here, embarrassed because I didn't know where to start. The devastation is so big and it's so far spread. I've got friends in every corner of it. My tag team partner and cousin, my partner for 12 years, who he doesn't wrestle now, but KC Thunder and his family are stuck in it. My announcer, Joe Wheeler, and his wife, they lost their businesses. They're stuck in Asheville, can't get out. So I know people affected. A pastor friend of mine in Newport that I grew up with, he is in it. He's safe, but he's trying to feed and clothe people that need it. We never get the national media that we should, because we're looked at by the national media as those hillbillies. Hey, we're the ones that invented and built the bomb that won the World War. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Holston Defense in Kingsport, Super invented in Kingsport. There's all kinds of stuff was invented here by people, but because we talk to them, they think we're nothing. There's communities that are completely demolished, completely destroyed. Asheville's getting a ton of coverage, thank God. Bad shape. They are in a bad, bad way. But there's towns here, all the focus is on Irwin. There's no focus on Chucky. There's no focus on Bumpus Cove. There's no focus on Trade, Tennessee. There's no focus on Roan Mountain. These towns, Heaton, North Carolina, Newland, these towns are demolished. They're gone. 200-year-old buildings and homes washed away. Schools going to have to be tore down. Businesses gone. There's no normalcy for these people to return to, and I would say many of these communities will never be again. And they need help, and that's why we got to do it together. The positivity you talked about, I'm a true believer in Jesus. I'm a true believer in prayer. I'm a true believer in miracles. I am a miracle. That I was told right after the pandemic, I'm a dead man walking. I'll never wrestle again. I'll never do this again. You're going to die. Not once, not twice. 3 different doctors told me that.
Mm-hmm.
Year and a half, not 1, not 2, but all 3 doctors signed papers for me to go back to wrestling. Said, you're a miracle. And so I believe in it. I've seen it. East Tennessee, Western North Carolina needs prayers and they need help. And anybody that wants to help, reach out to me. I'm very easy to find on social media. King of Kingsport on X, King of Kingsport on Instagram, Pro Wrestler Beau James, Beau. That's how I spell Beau. On Facebook, send me a message. I'll send you the link right away.
Yes. Yes, please do.
It will stay in these mountains. It's Samaritan Purse, Franklin Graham's group, and it is the Sullivan Baptist Relief Association. And folks, here's how I know it will stay in where it needs to go. Here's how I know they do the job. Here's how I know every dollar you give will go to help them. I've been on the ground with them. I've been in recovery in Kentucky and in West Virginia in those horrible floods there. You take both those floods together, they do not match what East Tennessee is facing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, every little bit helps, We all need care and love and it's the support just goes a long way. Before we close things off, just want to ask you a couple questions. You've got a podcast yourself. Let's talk about how you got started up with that.
I've had a Patreon podcast for several years where I do one. It's $2.99 a month. I tell one or two a month episodes, and it's just me talking about life in wrestling. So patreon.com/King of Kingsport. But I've just started one with John Boucher. John is also the co-host of Charting the Territories. John lives in New York City. John also does research for Dark Side of the Ring and a lot of other stuff. John don't like everybody knowing what he does. He doesn't get nearly the credit of what he does But I've had this idea about this podcast of how outlaw wrestling was. We weren't called independents back in the day. We were outlaws because we were running against the main wrestling promotions there.
Yeah, the big promotions.
Yeah. So it's a history of that. We don't cover anything past 1999. So it's 99 and before of how outlaw wrestling was, how independent wrestling was. Lots and lots of research goes into this. That's why it's not every week, because we don't have the time to do it every week. We're trying it right now to do it every 2 weeks to see how that goes. You'll get some interviews. We just had Bob Smith, who worked for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, on. Bob created the PWI 500. So we go through that whole process, and I explained to him how it changed my life and kept me booked with all that coverage that I got in it for all those years. Um, but we tell some insane stories of how wrestling used to be back in the good old days. Outlaws to independents. We're on most every platform now. It's still growing. We've not got on to Apple yet. They said I got to have 8 episodes before I can get on the Apple podcast stuff. So that's coming. But we're on Spotify. Uh, we're on like 100 different things. I can't tell all of them, you know. So just type it out and you can find it, or go to our Facebook or X or Instagram. All of it's Outlaws to Independence, and there's a link there to the actual homepage for it if you can't find it any other way. And we got a lot of great stuff coming up before the end of the year on that podcast that I'm looking forward to. We're 3 episodes in, and me and John just keep getting better and better at it. John was friends with my friend Al Getz. I knew of John for many years through research and his story and stuff. We had talked through emails and private message and stuff, but I met him in Waterloo, Iowa this year at the Theus Tragos Hall of Fame, and he got to asking me questions. And I said, "This is the co-host right here." And I said, "Hey, you want to do another podcast?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So that's how we got started.
So cool.
So yeah, and then I'm always like a guest on different ones. And if anybody's got a podcast that has messaged me saying, "Hey, can you do this?" And I say at some point, yes. Let me explain to you. It's taken Stanley a year to get me on here. I'm so busy, and we've had this date booked for weeks and weeks and weeks. When I finally said, "Okay, I got this Sunday open, I can do this,"
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
not expecting the floods and everything that came, but a lot of podcasts out there that I will do, some I won't do. But if you'd like to have me, you can just message me, and at some point we will make it happen probably. And always, let me plug this: kingofkingsport.com. You can get my books at any time. Do you want to be a wrestler, kid? This is my how I started at 14, how I started in the ring at 15. This takes you first through the first probably 25 years of my career. Then I've got It Takes All Kinds, the people, places, and events that make pro wrestling. That is just 25 years of short stories of life on the road. And then this is the big one. Don't miss this: The History of Wrestling in Kingsport.
I've got that one.
Okay, well, the 1950s book is coming very soon. And the 1970s book on Southeastern will debut in July next year in Waterloo, Iowa. But you can get them at kingofkingsport.com. I'll take the publishing fee out. I will take the shipping fee out. And the rest of it for the foreseeable future will go to flood relief. So if you want to help it, you like it. You also can get them on Amazon. You can get them on Amazon Kindle. Everywhere you can get them, it helps. And I always have them in the towns that I'm at. And, I sold out. I had a box of books last night, and I sold all of them in the town that I was in. So I was able to just take that straight to the Baptist Association today and say, "Here, put this with it and use it for whatever you need it for." So,
Well, Beau, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. It means a lot to me and to my listeners. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here. And you're more than welcome to come back.
okay, I'll try to come back in a few months and update you on how everything is going here. Let me throw this out. If there is anybody listening, if you don't live in the areas that are hit and you're not delivering or helping, don't go. Don't go. There's so many sightseers coming to look at the devastation. And here's what I ask all of them when I talk to them: if that was your home that went down the river, would you want anybody standing there looking at you? If that was your family member that they're still looking for, would you want anybody standing there gawking at it? So if you're not part of the solution, you are definitely part of the problem. And if you're coming up here or going to Western North Carolina just to look at it, you're in the way. You're keeping somebody from getting something done. So just stay home until they can get us cleaned out and cleared where we can get in there. But if you're going to help, jump on it. Go now. and keep going because it's going to take years to rebuild.
Well said. Thanks again, Beau.
Thank you.
All right, take care. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.